Hi, welcome back to Mr. Tilly's Math Magics. In this lesson, we're going to be going on with a bit of an introduction into algebra and learning some new terms that you're going to be hearing a lot over the next few lessons and going on with the next few years even whenever you see algebra in your math classes. So let's jump right in, shall we? Now, in this video, you will encounter a few new words that you will want to take note of. If you feel like we're going too fast, don't get too worried. Just pause or rewind and give yourself time to write down the definitions. Make sure that you do get them down so that you can reference them later when we start to use them a lot more often. So the first new thing we're going to be looking at, or the first new term, is in reference to just a standard number. When it comes to algebra, we refer to these as constants. Now, the important part about a constant is that the value of it does not change. It's not influenced by any other factor. So remember that one. The constant is just the same value all through the equation. Next, we're going to be looking at what we now, when we see letters, we're going to start to refer to these as variables. Now, some people do get tripped up when they see letters in numbers, and there are a couple of reasons for this. Firstly, they say, hey, we're doing math. Where did we start to use letters in place of numbers? I thought this was math, not English. They may ask, what is the value of X? And you know what? Sometimes we don't know the value of X, but sometimes we don't need to know. All we need to know is that there is one there and we call this a variable. Okay, so that's our next definition that we will want to write down. The next thing we're going to be considering is when we actually add our constants and our variables together. So they end up being written similar to this. You've got a number and a letter right next to each other. Now, by default in here, we don't write it, but that's actually a multiplication in there. We are doing actually 3 multiplied by a. Now, when we do write these symbols together, this value here that we used to know as a constant is no longer constant. The value no longer changes. It's now influenced by whatever the value of the variable is. So 3 times whatever this is will give us something at the end. We now refer to this as the coefficient. So a coefficient is a number with a variable attached. Now that we've written these two symbols together, we actually start to move on to our next stage and we start to build further on what we've been doing. Now, by default, again, remember mathematicians love that term, by default, our 3a without any symbol in front of it is in fact positive 3a. And when written all together like this, we actually refer to this as the term. Now, if this term is written right at the start, it's the first thing you write, you don't technically need to write the positive symbol there. We just assume that without that there, the whole term itself is in fact positive. It's like when you write a random constant and without specifying that it is in fact a negative value, by default, it's positive. And that does not change with algebra. Now, these 3 symbols all together, they refer to the term. So a term is a variable with a coefficient and a positive or negative with it. Now we're going to build on this further, and when we start to put multiple terms together and they start to look like this, as you can see there, positive 3a plus 2a, we've got our first term here, 1, 2, 3 symbols, and our second term here, 1, 2, 3 symbols. Adding them together or writing them together like this, we refer to this as an expression. Now, it's very important to remember here that when we combine terms together with operations like add, subtract, multiply, divide, we refer to this combination as expressions. And that's all it is. We've not calculated anything. We've not come to any kind of conclusion. Just these alone are referred to as an expression. And finally, we have one more level to add in, and that being what we now refer to as an equation. Now, as you can see, we have a term, and then we've got our equal sign, and we've got another two terms over here as well. So an equation is multiple expressions joined together with an equal sign. Now, this may not be equals to. That, remember, have a think back to previous math lessons. We've got multiple different ways, different symbols that can go in place of there. Maybe these expressions are not equal. This symbol here still serves the same purpose. So ultimately what we're looking for is expression, and one of any equal sign to join them together. They are some of the very important key words that you are going to hear throughout the course of not just this unit, but the rest of the time that you actually work with algebra. If you've got any questions, please write them down, bring them into class. Feel free to ask your teacher, because I'll bet they've got a great way of explaining it for you. All right, I will catch you next time.